Ever feel like just stepping into a time capsule? Well, today we're exploring a place that might just give you that feeling.
Ooh, I like where this is going. Time travel. Sign me up.
Okay, not literal time travel, but close.
Right.
We're heading to Osaka, to a spot that's not your typical tourist destination. It's called Tsuruhashi Market.
Tsuruhashi Market. Okay, I'm intrigued. What's so special about it?
Think bustling alleyways,
Yeah.
shops that look like they haven't changed in decades, and the air is filled with the aroma of Korean BBQ.
Okay, now you've got my attention. So we're talking old Japan meets a thriving Korean community.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today.
Perfect. I love a good cultural matchup. What sources do we have to guide us on this deep dive?
Well, we've got this awesome YouTube vlog by a resident named G. He takes us on a virtual tour of the market, giving us a real feel for the place.
A local's perspective is always the best. What else?
We've also got some articles that provide a bit more historical context and a broader perspective on Tsuruhashi's significance.
So what's our mission? What are we trying to uncover about Tsuruhashi today?
It's this fusion, right? Old Japan, thriving Korean community. How did that happen? What makes Tsuruhashi so unique? And honestly, what hidden gems will we discover if we were to wander through those alleyways ourselves?
Let's start with that time capsule feeling you mentioned. G keeps mentioning these worn-down shop signs, some that look like they haven't been touched in decades.
Yeah. And he contrasts them with places like Kuromon Market, which is way more modern and renovated.
Right. It's like stepping back in time. He even shows this one toy shop, Kobayashi Toys. It looks straight out of the Showa era. You just don't see that kind of thing anymore.
Hardly. It makes you wonder if they even sell Showa-era toys in there.
I know. And, you know, that visual, that old toy store, it's a perfect example of what fuels this fascination with the Showa era in Japan, what they call Showa nostalgia.
Yeah. What's the deal with that? Why is everyone so obsessed with that period?
Well, the Showa era, which ran from 1926 to 1989, is often seen through rose-tinted glasses. It was a time of major economic growth for Japan.
Ah, the good old days.
Exactly. People look back on it as a simpler time, a time of stability and prosperity, you know, a time before the bubble burst.
Oh, right. That whole economic thing in the 90s.
Yeah. And so for many places like Tsuruhashi, which haven't drastically changed, they tap into this longing for that bygone era.
Makes sense. Nostalgia can be powerful.
Yeah.
But it's not just the shops, right? Even the layout of the market itself, like the maze of alleyways, that's also tied to history. G mentions that it wasn't a planned development. It actually evolved from a post-World War II black market.
I mean, that's a crucial piece of the puzzle. Tsuruhashi's structure, its very DNA, is rooted in those chaotic post-war years.
Yeah, makes those winding alleyways even more intriguing, right?
Absolutely. Think about it. After World War II, Japan was devastated. The economy was in shambles. Resources were incredibly scarce.
So people had to find ways to survive.
Exactly. And black markets emerged as this lifeline, a way for people to buy and sell essential goods outside of the struggling official economy.
It's fascinating how something that started out of necessity could evolve into such a vibrant cultural hub.
It is, isn't it? And, you know, G mentions that Tsuruhashi was actually a major transportation hub before the war, which makes it even more interesting.
Ah, so it was already a central location, even back then.
Yeah. And when the war ended, with resources so scarce, that transportation infrastructure made it a prime location for a black market. Easy to get things in and out, buyers and sellers all flocking there.
So those narrow, winding streets weren't some quirky design choice.
Not at all. It was all about practicality and, let's be honest, a bit of secrecy, too. It's a stark contrast to how modern shopping districts are designed, you know, all planned out, wide streets, uniformity. Tsuruhashi's layout is a direct reflection of its unplanned, chaotic beginnings.
Wow. It really shows how history is embedded in the very fabric of the place, right? Like you can see those post-war years reflected in the layout of the market.
Exactly. It's not just a market. It's a living, breathing testament to a specific moment in time. But there's another layer to this history, right? The Korean connection. The Koreatown aspect that G keeps mentioning.
All right, all those Korean shops, the restaurants, the food stalls. How did that become such a dominant part of Tsuruhashi?
Well, it goes back even further than World War II to the early 20th century when Japan was ruling over Korea.
So we're going back to the colonial period.
We are. And during that time, a lot of Koreans were brought to Japan as laborers, many of them ending up in Osaka.
Wow, so there was already a significant Korean presence in Osaka even before the war.
There was. And then, in the aftermath of the war, With the black market thriving in Tsuruhashi, it became this natural gathering place for many Koreans.
Right. They needed to survive too, and
Yep.
black market provided opportunities.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about economic opportunity, it was about finding a sense of community, a place to connect with others who shared their language and culture, especially in a time when they were facing a lot of discrimination.
I can see how that would be so important in those difficult years. So Tsuruhashi became more than just a market.
It did. It became a refuge, a place where the Korean community could put down roots. And you see that legacy today in Ikuno Ward, where Tsuruhashi is located.
Okay, what about Ikuno Ward?
Well, Ikuno has the highest percentage of foreign residents in all of Japan,
Yeah.
and Koreans make up the largest group within that. It's a testament to that history, to the role Tsuruhashi played in providing a space for the Korean community to flourish.
It's amazing how a collection of shops in a maze of alleyways can hold so much history, so much cultural significance. It's not just a market, it's a microcosm of these larger forces at play.
Absolutely. And that's just the beginning of our exploration. We've got more layers to peel back, more fascinating stories to uncover.
Okay, I'm ready. What's next?
Well, let's jump ahead a bit from that post-war era to something G encounters that kind of blows his mind. He describes seeing all these young Japanese women flocking to the Korean shops, especially those selling K-pop merchandise.
Oh yeah, he mentions that. He's like, I didn't expect Japanese youth to be so obsessed with Korean culture. It's like this whole other energy in Tsuruhashi.
Totally. It's like two worlds colliding.
Yeah.
The older generation of Koreans whose presence is tied to that historical context we just discussed, and then this new generation of Japanese fans captivated by the latest trends in Korean pop culture.
It's like Tsuruhashi is this living timeline of Korean influence in Japan. We've got the historical roots and then this modern K-pop boom happening right now.
Exactly. And it's not just about the merchandise. G also talks about all these Korean food stalls that are super popular, not just with the Korean community, but with young Japanese people too, all drawn in by this K-pop wave.
It's fascinating how a single place can embody so many different layers of cultural interaction. So, how do we explain this K-pop phenomenon? Why are young Japanese people so into it?
Well, it's a complex phenomenon, but I think a big part of it is just the global reach of K-pop. It's not just music, it's fashion, dance, a whole aesthetic. It's captured the imaginations of young people all over the world, and Japan is no exception.
Yeah, and G even points out this stark contrast, right? There's this traditional Japanese butcher shop, totally empty, while every shop selling anything related to Korean culture is packed.
It's a powerful visual, right? It shows you the power of what we call soft power. It's the ability to influence not through force, but through cultural appeal.
And K-pop, with its catchy tunes and stylish stars, it's definitely got that appeal.
It's like it's created this cultural bridge between Korea and Japan, particularly for the younger generation, and Tsuruhashi is like the meeting point on that bridge.
It's like we're seeing this cultural exchange happening in real time. We've got the
Yeah.
history of the Korean community in Osaka, and now this modern K-pop wave, all converging in this one place. It's like, what's it actually like to be there, to walk those alleyways and experience that fusion firsthand?
Well, luckily for us, G's vlog gives us a pretty good glimpse into that experience. He describes it as a sensory overload in a good way.
He does. At one point, he says, you feel like you've traveled back in time. And then later, he's talking about how vibrant it all is.
It's like this collision of the senses. You've got the smoky aroma of Korean BBQ filling the air, those narrow alleyways crammed with people, the sounds of Korean and Japanese mixing together. It's a world away from the polished, organized streets you often see in modern Japan.
It sounds like a completely different side of Japan, one that most tourists never get to see.
Totally. And what's really cool is that G doesn't shy away from those sensory details. He talks about the food he tries, the smells, the sounds, the whole experience.
Yeah. Speaking of food, what did he actually eat? I'm getting hungry just thinking about it.
Ooh, good question. Well, he mentions this bubbling beef hot pot, which sounds absolutely divine. He says it tastes incredibly authentic, just like something you'd get in Korea.
Beef hot pot. Okay, what else?
Oh, and there's this hot egg pancake he tries. Have you ever had hot egg?
I don't think so. Is that Korean?
Well, that's the thing. G's not even sure if it's Korean or Japanese. He says it's this popular street food in Tsuruhashi, but its origins are a bit murky.
Huh, that's interesting. It's like this perfect example of how cultures blend together and create something new to the point where you can't even tell where one culture ends and another begins.
Exactly. And that's what makes Tsuruhashi so fascinating. It's not just about two cultures existing side by side. It's about how they've influenced and shaped each other over time.
We've come a long way, haven't we? We started with this idea of Tsuruhashi as this maze-like market frozen in time, And now we're talking about the evolution of Korean influence in Japan and the power of cultural exchange.
And we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover, so many more layers to this story.
Okay, before we dive into those other layers, let's take a quick break. But when we come back, we'll explore even more fascinating aspects of Tsuruhashi and what they tell us about the world we live in. All right, we're back, ready to continue our journey through the fascinating world of Tsuruhashi Market.
Oh, absolutely. We've covered a lot of ground already, but there's still so much to explore.
We were just talking about how Tsuruhashi challenges our perceptions of Japan,
Yeah.
as this very homogenous society.
Right, and it really highlights the multicultural reality of the country. It's a side of Japan that we don't often see, especially not in the typical tourist experience.
It reminds us that cultural identity is complex and ever-evolving.
Exactly. It's not about fitting neatly into a single box. It's about embracing the way traditions and influences blend together over time.
Like that hot pancake G mentioned.
Ah, yes, the mystery pancake. Is it Korean? Is it Japanese?
Who knows? And in a way, it doesn't even matter. It's become this unique part of Tsuruhashi's identity, a symbol of that cultural fusion.
It's a perfect example of how cultural exchange can lead to something entirely new, something that transcends those rigid categories we often try to impose.
It's not just about two cultures existing side by side. It's about how they've actively shaped and influenced each other.
You got it. It makes you think about how Tsuruhashi itself came to be. Remember how we were talking about its origins as a black market?
Yeah, and how that unplanned organic growth led to the maze of alleyways and that sense of, I don't know, authenticity.
Exactly. And that organic growth applies to more than just the physical layout of the market. It's also how it became this cultural melting pot.
Yeah, that wasn't some grand scheme by city planners, right? Let's create a Koreatown.
Not at all. It happened naturally, driven by the needs and desires of the people who lived and worked there.
It's like a living organism, constantly adapting to its environment.
A perfect analogy. There's this inherent vibrancy that comes from that kind of unplanned development. It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it's also undeniably authentic.
Makes you wonder, could you ever intentionally recreate a place like Tsuruhashi?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think it gets to the heart of what makes Tsuruhashi so special. It's the result of this very specific set of historical circumstances, a confluence of factors that you could never artificially replicate.
It's like trying to bottle lightning, right?
Exactly. You can't force it. It has to happen organically. And that's why it's so important to appreciate places like Tsuruhashi. They offer this glimpse into a way of life, a way of interacting with the world that's becoming increasingly rare.
It reminds us that sometimes the most fascinating places aren't those that are meticulously designed and curated, but those that have evolved over time, shaped by the ebb and flow of history and the everyday lives of the people who inhabit them.
So well said. It's interesting to contrast that with G's observations about the younger generation in Tsuruhashi.
Oh, you mean the K-pop fans?
Yep.
Yeah.
He was surprised by their enthusiasm, remember? He even said something like, I didn't expect Japanese youth to be so obsessed with Korean culture. It's like he was witnessing this cultural shift happening right before his eyes.
He was. And the way he contrasts those bustling Korean shops with the empty butcher shop across the street. It's such a powerful visual. You can almost feel the energy of that cultural exchange.
It speaks volumes about the influence of K-pop, and more broadly, about the power of what we call soft power. It's the ability to connect with people, to influence their tastes and preferences, not through force or coercion, but through cultural appeal.
And K-pop has definitely mastered that art, wouldn't you say? The music, the fashion, the whole package. It's designed to be appealing, and it clearly works.
Oh, absolutely. It's created this incredible cultural bridge between Korea and Japan, especially among young people. It reminds us that cultural influence is a two-way street. Just as Japanese culture has influenced other parts of the world, Japan is being shaped by outside influences as well. It's this constant back and forth that makes cultural landscapes so dynamic.
Makes you wonder about the future of Tsuruhashi. Will it retain its predominantly Korean character, or will it continue to evolve as new influences come into play?
That's the beauty of it. It's like this living, breathing organism, constantly adapting to the changing demographics and cultural landscape of Osaka.
It's like we're watching history unfold in real time, layer by layer.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so fascinating. Tsuruhashi is this microcosm of the larger forces shaping our world.
Globalization, cultural exchange, the interplay between tradition and modernity, it's all there, playing out in the alleyways of this one market.
It reminds us that even in a place that feels frozen in time, like G described parts of Tsuruhashi, change is inevitable. And often, that change is driven by the energy and passion of young people, like those K-pop fans.
So after this deep dive into Tsuruhashi, what are some of the key takeaways that stand out to you? What have we learned from exploring this unique corner of the world?
For me, it's the importance of embracing diversity, of understanding the complex historical and cultural forces that shape the world we live in. Tsuruhashi is a perfect example of how different cultures can not only coexist, but thrive together in unexpected ways.
I love that. It's not just about tolerance, it's about recognizing the value that different cultures bring to the table. It's about expanding our horizons, challenging our assumptions, and appreciating the richness of a world that's constantly evolving.
Couldn't agree more. Tsuruhashi is a reminder that the most rewarding journeys often lead us off the beaten path. It's in those unexpected places, those hidden corners of the world, that we truly discover the beauty and complexity of the human experience.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what do you say we leave our listeners with a challenge? A challenge to embrace that spirit of exploration and discovery in their own lives.
I love that. Let's encourage them to find their own Tsuruhashi, wherever that may be.
Think about your own community, your neighborhood. What hidden stories might be lurking just beneath the surface? What cultural intersections might you discover if you took the time to look?
It's like what G did in Tsuruhashi, you know? He followed his curiosity, he followed his senses, and in doing so, he uncovered this rich tapestry of history, culture, and human experience, and that's exactly what we want to encourage you to do as well.
So next time you're planning a trip, or even just an afternoon outing, think about venturing off the beaten path. Skip the tourist traps, talk to the locals, explore those side streets, and allow yourself to be surprised by what you find.
Those are the kinds of experiences that stay with you, the ones that make you see the world differently.
Like G stumbling upon that smoky beef hot pot stall tucked away in a back alley.
Yeah.
Those are the moments that make travel so enriching. It's not just about ticking things off a list, it's about connecting with people, hearing their stories, and experiencing the world through a new lens.
It's about opening yourself up to the unexpected, to the possibility of discovering something truly extraordinary in the most ordinary of places.
And so, from a labyrinth of alleyways in Osaka to a broader conversation about exploration and the beauty of diversity, we come to the end of our journey.
We've uncovered the historical layers that make Tsuruhashi so unique. We've tasted the flavors of Korean BBQ. We've felt the pulse of those crowded streets.
But most importantly, we've hopefully inspired you, our listener, to be an explorer, to seek out the unexpected, and to embrace the diversity that makes our world so fascinating.
So go out there, explore your world, and who knows, maybe you'll find your own Tsuruhashi waiting just around the corner.
It's like picturing it, like actually imagining yourself there.
Yeah, like taking a mental stroll through Tsuruhashi.
Right. Feeling the energy of the crowd, hearing those shopkeepers calling out.
Smelling that amazing Korean BBQ.
Exactly. It's all about tapping into those senses, even if we're not physically there.
And that's what makes exploring new places so exciting.
It is. It's not just about seeing the sights. It's about experiencing them.
Totally. Like, remember how G described that feeling of stepping back in time?
Yeah. It's almost like he stumbled into a portal to another era.
And then a few minutes later, he's surrounded by K-pop fans, the latest trends, a completely different vibe.
It's that contrast that makes Tsuruhashi so fascinating, so multi-layered.
Exactly. It's like a living, breathing testament to how cultures interact and evolve over time.
And it's a reminder that those interactions can be messy, surprising, and totally unexpected.
Speaking of unexpected, that's what we want to challenge you, our listener, to embrace.
Right, that sense of adventure, that willingness to step outside your comfort zone.
Because the most rewarding experiences often come when you least expect them.
Like finding that hidden gem of a restaurant.
Or stumbling upon a local festival you didn't even know existed.
It's those moments that make life and travel so enriching.
Absolutely. So think about it. Where can you find your own Tsuruhashi?
It might be closer than you think.
It could be right in your own neighborhood, a street you've never explored, a shop you've always passed by but never entered.
It's all about being curious, keeping your eyes open, and being open to new experiences.
You never know what hidden treasures you might uncover.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Tsuruhashi Market, let's take a moment to appreciate those unexpected journeys.
The ones that take us off the beaten path and lead us to something truly special.
Whether it's a bustling market in Osaka,
Or a hidden gem in your own backyard.
embrace the diversity, the chaos, the beauty of it all.
Because that's where the real magic lies.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Tsuruhashi Market.
We hope you've enjoyed exploring this fascinating corner of the world.
And who knows, maybe we'll meet you in Tsuruhashi someday.
Until then, happy exploring!